be surprised how many people believe that they don't exist beyond this world. And yet, the more that we explore the non-physical and these moments of insight and intuition, the way that we acquire information, we ask questions, we seek to expand our awareness of who we are and connect with our non-physical counterparts, we reach a point where it becomes very, very clear to us that we are more than our bodies, that while the body may die in this form, that we continue and we reestablish the connections that are who we are, fundamentally rejoining our energy system.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Shifting Dimensions podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Moses, and thank you again for tuning in. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Stefan Daniel. Stefan is an artist and writer, recognized for his ability to articulate the intersection between physical and non-physical worlds. Stefan is also the author of Brighter Realms, which explores the path less taken to spiritual growth and enlightenment. Stefan, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to Shifting Dimensions.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start off by asking you, why was it important for you to write the book Brighter Realms?
For many years, beginning as a child, I experienced out of body events. And I had these unusual experiences that I couldn't place in the context of my physical life. And the world was teaching me to conform to a standard outside of me, to understand my relationship to the world, through my teachers and my education, my parents, who did not provide any understanding to these unusual experiences that I had been having since childhood. And I hid them away. I put them away, not having any context to understand them. I did not investigate them. And when I entered my 20s, I began to sort of pull back the layers and look at who I was and why I was having these experiences, what made me different. And there was an unusual event that occurred in the late 60s. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I saw a TV commercial, and it showed an animated form, a woman lying in a bed, and she began to rise out of the bed, and the walls dissolved, and she took flight into what appeared to be other dimensions. And while this is occurring, there's this very elegant woman's voice narrating. Have you ever had experiences where you felt that you were flying during sleep? And as this Lynn Redgrave-like voice is narrating this, I'm thinking to myself that other people experience this, that I wasn't alone. And she literally said, as she narrated this, if you have experiences like this, you are not alone. And that gave me a tremendous sense of relief that what I was experiencing was something that other people experience. And it woke me up to this possibility that I could connect with these people. But when I began to talk about these experiences with my parents or other people in my life, they looked at me like I was different. They looked through me. They didn't relate to me. They couldn't talk to me about the experiences because they themselves were not having similar experiences. So I remember in one of my first relationships, my first girlfriend, I told her about these experiences, and she was the first person that I shared these events with. And over the years, I gradually told friends, and then I was married later on. I told my wife. So I began to open up more and more, but I still had no baseline or context to be able to explore these unusual experiences. And then I began learning about meditation and other practices that could put me in touch with this part of me that had this knowledge, this awareness. And through these practices, I developed an understanding that all people have this capacity, this potential to experience who they are beyond the body. I think we all recognize fundamentally, we look in a mirror, that we are more than our body. We are more than what we see. that there is more going on around us, that we are a part of a much larger theme, a relationship to energy. And this has become a focal point of my life that provided me with the desire and the motivation to write Brighter Realms. And this has been a central theme in my life for many years. And self-exploration, some people walk on a mountain, some people dive under the ocean. I explore the non-physical. And this has brought me to writing Brighter Realms. And here we are.
So that's very fascinating because you talk about kind of having these experiences as early as 6 or 7 years old, where you were having experiences that were non-physical, where you were interacting with non-physical realms. And let me know, I don't mean to be reductive. Let me know if that's what you were trying to
That's
emphasize.
precisely what I was trying to emphasize. Yeah.
Okay. So in having those experiences and not really knowing what they meant, but over the course of your life, you've dug deeper. And now you have written the book Brighter Realms, which I believe also tells the stories of other people who have had these non-physical experiences. Why is it important for people to understand the non-physical realities that whether we're conscious of or unconscious of that we're constantly interacting with? Why is it important to share these stories and share your story as well?
Because it teaches us about who we are and our relationship to where we come from and where we go from here. And why it's important is that we live in a world that is based on a belief system that takes our attention outside of us. And the result is that we've created a very fragmentary world, a fragmentary mindset, me from you, my belief from your belief, black from white. On and on, this theme of fragmentation forms a function that divides us from the undivided wholeness of ourselves. Beliefs are a very powerful thing that influence our perceptions and how we experience reality. So, why this is important is because it gives us a foundation of understanding that we are basically all the same, that there really is no difference between us, that we all come from the non physical, and the way that we express ourselves in physicality through our individuality, our free will, creates a very definite influence in how we experience this reality. And yet, what we have formed are these beliefs and perceptions of separation when we are really a unified whole. When we come from the same place, we have the same experiences, we feel love, compassion, empathy, that these are the innate qualities of our humanity, and that there are other emotions that we experience, such as fear and anger, that divide and separate us and create this theme that misleads us into believing that we are alone and isolated in this world, but that each of us has a connection to what I call an energetic self or multiple selves, an energetic family in non-physical worlds that we have split off from to experience physicality, to have this adventure that we're on. And yet, when we leave here, we return to our wholeness, our non-physical family. And within that family is a higher self that each of us has a direct association to an energetic counterpart that I call the higher self. And that's just a name, it's just a term. It's used for the sake of being able to communicate that we do have an association, each of us, to a highly intelligent and highly organized energetic system. And within that system, we have a higher self. And here we are, an aspect of our higher self split off to experience and to learn and to grow. And that's why it's important.
Thank you so much for bringing up the higher self piece because I really want to dive deep into that, right? I know that that's a term we use often when we talk about our spiritual growth, spiritual journey. At some point, we hear the term higher self, connecting with our higher self. And I think so far from what I've heard from you, this is the most in-depth definition, and I hate to use the word definition, but the most in-depth explanation of what a higher self is. So I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into that,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So to kind of level set everything, again, you said that the higher self is our energetic essence, right? And
I,
we are
I think of the higher self as the core essence, and we are, in essence, split off from our core essence. But go on.
okay. The higher self is our core essence, and in a sense, we are split off from our essence. It almost sounds like our core essence, which in this context we're saying it's the higher self, is having multiple experiences, multiple incarnate experiences, whether as a human being or another being potentially on a different planet. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Interesting. Okay, so when you say our higher self, which is our essence, is comes from an energetic family, what does that mean?
Well, we each have associations to interrelated relationships, I should say, with what I would term our source, our energetic origin in non-physical worlds. So we have a physical family, we have parents, we have relatives, we also have an energetic family. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so it sounds like what you're describing a little bit sounds similar to what I've heard people term as soul groups.
Yes, I've heard
Okay.
the term. And as you're aware, and I've been aware, I've heard the term higher self and soul groups going back to the 70s, and perhaps even earlier than that, picking it up through the media, inadvertently as a child. But the media today has become much more savvy, I should say, different forms of media at delivering these messages. And there are many authors and writers who are exploring the higher self. So we have access to vast troves of information today that we didn't have access to when I was a child, or perhaps even when you were a child. So we're able to have this conversation more openly and with access to greater insight than ever before, which is exciting.
It's very exciting, and this is exactly why I do what I do because I love to dig deep into these subject matters because I have so many questions. So again, going back to the fact that our higher self is our true and core essence, how can we reconnect to that? How do we know when we're away from our true essence, and how can we reconnect to that higher self?
Well, that's a great question because, as I was saying, we tend to be very easily distracted in this environment by situations outside of us, and we lose sight of ourselves. And this point is so fundamental to understanding how to kind of reestablish these existing connections. So I begin with the essence, and I'll just start with this idea that reality is imagination at the frontier of thought. That's a quote that I wrote years ago as I was trying to explore myself. And yet, what gives us the power to acquire insight, intuition, creativity, to experience and feel empathy, compassion, and love is so much more than imagination. People are fundamentally an energetic essence with a core identity. It's what I think of as the higher self, representing the origin of these qualities of our humanity, the insight, intuition, creativity, empathy, compassion. And love is just a word I throw in there because in the non-physical, I really haven't heard the word love spoken. I have in the relationship of helping people to understand who they are and where they're coming from. I think of the higher self and the energetic family, but it's still a human concept that we have a lot of our own ideas about what it means. So, the journey that we're on can be fraught with obstacles. We can struggle to feel safe in a world of uncertainty. We can feel disconnected and unmoored from ourselves. And fear and anger play a role in our experience, interfering with intuition, creativity, and diminishing our capacity for empathy, compassion, and love. Our essence is what we seek for courage and strength in whatever situations we're in. Light and peace are our birthright. And tuning in offers us the potential to access the benevolent resources from our non-physical origin, to be connected. And I think that's what we're all seeking when we're learning about meditation, developing a yoga practice, taking a walk, playing with a child or an animal. We're trying to feel connected. And it's the things that we pursue that give us that sense of connection that help us feel whole and self-aware. And that's where we delight in the human experience, because everything else outside of us can be a challenge to navigate until we feel connected. And that's our ultimate goal, is to feel and be connected. So I can tell you this story about my mother. And she was 31 years old, and she experienced a terrible trauma when her father passed away. He was her best friend. He died of a sudden illness. It happened overnight. And she was terrified that the connection was broken forever. And as she attempted to take control of her experience, she became angry. I never saw this anger, but I felt that she withdrew. And she withdrew from her family, and she fell into discord with the world. My father, brothers, and sisters, and I watched her slowly disappear from our lives. I was just a child, but this went on for months, for about 6 months. And the further away she became, the less recognizable she appeared. And her capacity to experience empathy, compassion, and love was diminished. She went to bed heartbroken for these 6 months, and she eventually reached an impasse. And one morning, she was wakened by her father's voice. This is what I mean by the non-physical touching us in unforeseen and mysterious ways. She lifted her head from her pillow and saw him standing at the foot of her bed. He told her he was happy where he was, and he asked her to let him go. A powerful feeling of calm came over her. She realized her father was not far away. And my mother had discovered existing connections. And this sense of awareness helped her recover her wholeness. She became connected to the non-physical. And through these connections, the fragmentary effects of emotional pain was erased overnight. And the experience gave her a renewed vision of empathy, compassion, and love. She was able to move and go on with her life. And I've heard many people's stories of transcendental events. Some people have had near-death experiences, vivid dreams or visions. Some glimpsed other worlds during meditation. Others experienced hypnosis or forms of regression therapy, or they encountered loved ones who died, like my mother. And I have heard, as I was saying, the term higher self from spiritual authors for many, many years, going back to the 70s. Yet what's interesting is that during my out-of-body experiences, my higher self has never appeared to me to say they are my higher self. And I want to stay on track here with the essence, because I think that's so fundamental to this. So, and then we'll go back to the higher self. Everything that we do in life, it really kind of does either one of two things. It takes us away from ourselves, or it puts us in touch with ourselves. And the things that take us away from ourselves, like a challenging job, a stressful job. Not all jobs are challenging and stressful, but they certainly can be at moments. A challenging relationship, a sick child, a sick animal that we're caring for. And we tend to lose sight of the bigger picture. And the goal really is, what we're seeking is to feel unified and feel whole. And that's really the premise of the book. And actually, the book that you read is the earlier version that I put into the market to test. I have a second edition coming out in about a month or two. It's going into production soon. And that version goes much more into depth into the subject that we're talking about. So I'm kind of going outside the envelope of what I wrote in this book and talking about the new version of the book here. And in the new version, for example, I talk a lot about exercises that each of us can develop skill or the mindset. The skill is really a mindset in this context to tune into our essence, to tune into the hidden layers of our inner life. Our inner life is our essence. It's that part of us that exists outside of the physical world, that has a foot in two worlds, the physical world, and because we're here in a physical body, we have a foot in this world. But the physical body, our personality, our ego are only parts of the suit we wear. Our essence is essentially who we are. And when I'm interfacing in the non-physical, for example, I may have difficulty interpreting with my human mind what I'm experiencing. So this relies, my ability to acquire insight or information then relies on discernment. And discernment means accepting the circumstances that I've created and then allowing my essence to interface with my NP, my non-physical counterparts, in order to acquire information. And that sounds a little bit advanced maybe, but I've broken this down into very easy to follow exercises. And one of those exercises here is, I am referencing notes here as I talk to you because there's so much information. But, one of the problems with the higher self or the techniques that I'm talking about is I can't really offer techniques to help people connect with their higher self, because that relationship is as unique as a fingerprint. And it is so fantastically unique to each of us that the higher self owns that territory. I don't dare touch that. I can't cross that line. In fact, I've been asked not to cross that line. But what I can do is offer techniques to help people get in touch with their essence. And how do we develop a stronger connection and foster intuition? We begin by paying attention to ourselves in our everyday lives. These are simple things. A psychologist might tell you these things. Our attitudes, our temperaments, our thoughts, our emotions, what moves our needle, happy, sad, afraid, apprehensive, curious, etc. Behaviors manifest in our thoughts, yet the origin of behaviors come from deep within our mental and psychological landscape. Learning to observe ourselves can put us in touch, really reveal patterns of the forces behind us and put us in touch with the hidden layers of our inner self, what is essentially our essence. And simple things like keeping a dream journal, writing down your thoughts every day and your feelings, what's going on in your life. How do we take an account for that? Why did I misbehave the way I just did in that phone call? Why was I feeling so impatient? For example, when we explore ourselves from the context of our feelings, we can ask ourselves, well, I felt impatient in that interaction with that person. It had nothing to do with that person. And here I'm going to get myself out of the way. I'm going to ask myself how I was feeling, right? What was I feeling in that moment? And then through that feeling, I'm going to say, well, my mind and my great intellect is going to be challenged by trying to understand why I was feeling that way. So I'm going to take that word of maybe I was feeling anxious, maybe I was feeling impatient, maybe I was feeling that there was something else hanging over me. And it wasn't because necessarily something bad happened that day, but it may be the broader context of feeling in the last few months. Where have I been in the last few months? Have I been feeling free in my life? Have I been feeling easy? Have I been feeling compressed and feeling stressed and bogged down by the weight of the world? What's really going on? But I'll try to identify a feeling, and I'll do the same in dreams. I might have a dream and then I'll associate a feeling to the dream. It's like the dream was great, whatever, it was good, it was bad, but what was I feeling? What was the feeling behind that dream? And I'll take that feeling and I will literally forget about it. I will send it out into the universe and allow my essence to be the lens to interface with my energetic counterparts, my non physical family, my higher self. And days later, a day later, days later, weeks later, sometimes longer, a unique insight may be returned to me to give me a perspective on what's going on with my life. I ask a question and I forget about it. I can ask a question of a feeling because this is really the undertone. This is what moves me. This is what we're here for, to feel and experience. And so feelings are a great sort of a center point, point of reference that we can explore ourselves with. So by asking the question and letting it go, I allow for the experience to enlighten me through an awareness that I didn't have before, by literally letting that question go into the universe. And if I hold on to that question and I take it to my psychologist friend and I say, well, what do you think about this? This is what's going on with me. I may spend too much time trying to riddle through my vast intellect, or your vast, we all have this intellect, to try to understand what's going on with us. And that's why a good psychologist can kind of help us to be a mirror for ourselves, to interface with ourselves and come to our own answers. Or a friend, psychologist, parent, nobody really has the answers. We have the answers. The answers are within us. We have to discover them on our own. And this is the value of the essence, tuning us into that larger content, that larger experience that we're all a part of, and allowing our essence the time and the patience, giving our patience to it, to return to us a perspective. Now, this is what's challenging, is that if we're looking for answers and solid, clear-cut answers, that's a hard thing to acquire. Answers are hard to get to. But to get to understanding, I think that's what we're trying to find, is understanding, personal understanding, an awareness that we didn't have before, a perspective. And if we're always trying to seek and find answers, a clear-cut answer, that we're trying to satisfy our psyche with, that becomes a burden. Because from my understanding, what I've done with the non-physical is that there really are no answers, because everything is static, everything is changing. So today I might get a point of view that will be vastly different than tomorrow. So I'm always trying to be open and flexible and accepting of where I'm at, accepting of the world, and trying to find my relationship in it by interfacing with that hub of relationships that I have in the non-physical, that we all have. So we all have this ability to tune into our essence. And remember, it's just a word, essence. It's just a name that I'm giving it for the sake of this conversation, one human to another. We do that. But in the non-physical, language can be a very abstract idea. When you're trying to find the language for a feeling, that can be impossible. It can be very difficult. It's very abstract. When we're trying to find the language for an impulse or an insight and awareness, okay, great. So I wrote a book about it, but it's still an interpretation. It's my interpretation, my experience. You're having your own experience.
You covered quite a lot there. So I'm going to start with the very beginning of what you said in terms of in life, we're constantly making decisions or taking actions that are either drawing us closer to our essence, closer to our authentic selves, or taking us far away from it. And I use the word authentic because a lot of what you were just describing sounds similar to why people harp on authenticity, because the more authentic you are in terms of your feelings, what you actually desire, what you want to explore, who you are at your core, the closer you get to that essence that you were talking about, or feel more aligned with who you are. And I think a lot of us know what it means to be aligned, because there's a little bit more ease with alignment versus when you're going against the grain, right? There's a
Right.
little there tends to be a little bit more mental ease, even if the world opposes your preference, if that makes any sense. Over time,
Sure.
there's a little bit more mental ease with that. So I really resonate with that. And I think a lot of the listeners probably resonate with that as well. Something else that you touched on that I thought was very important, um, is this idea of tapping into our intuition and letting the answers come to us, right? Or maybe letting the understanding come to us. Because I recently had an epiphany very similar to which describes or which aligns with what you just said, which is sending out a question, forgetting about it, and letting the guidance, understanding, or dare I say answers flow in when it's appropriate. And to your point, sometimes the information and trying to decode it with my human brain, it's two different things because words fail to do me justice sometimes when it's like I understand the guidance that I just received. But even as I'm trying to write it down or put it into human words, it's still hard to fully grasp the concept of everything, but I understand what I just received. So I think that's also very important that you highlighted that piece because I think um as human beings, we obviously have an ego and we want answers a specific way. And I think in order for our intuition to speak to us and for us to hear it, we have to be detached from what we want to hear so we can receive the right guidance from our true self, from our essence, and from our energetic family.
Yeah, when we're too attached to an idea, we try to control the experience of it. And in letting go, we allow for synchronicity. We allow for things to unfold as they're supposed to. And even if I may have a question that I'm seeking an understanding to, somewhere deep down, I just want an answer. you know, I just want a clear cut answer that's going to help me go on my way and put it to rest once and for all. But it's not always that way. And sometimes the reply that we receive can create another question and another question. And so it becomes a Pandora's box of exploration. But that's what we're here for. That's the whole point. I think that the idea of self-exploration is something we do from the moment we're born to the moment we depart from this world. And if we're not exploring or if we're focusing elsewhere, we're losing the opportunity to experience that authenticity that we're all seeking, and to have a sense of this this bigger self, this larger identity, putting us in tune with our core experience or our purpose, what it is that we're supposed to be doing here. Well, we may be doing a job that we don't like, but that doesn't mean we don't have the opportunity to explore and to learn about ourselves and our relationship to this world and the non-physical, where we come from. So I think that discernment plays an important role, because if we're always focused on seeking answers outside of us, getting an education is a great thing, but 99.9% of our education is knowledge that we're acquiring through books or from the world outside of us. It doesn't really feed our spirit, our soul. Yeah, we use the term soul, and just to break that down, I think of it as the essence. It doesn't really feed our essence. And through the essence, we have the potential to experience or interact with our soul. In fact, I think many of us do already unconsciously interact in these realms. And the opportunity to get ourselves out of the way and foster this sense of self-awareness, of tuning in, that's where our greatest fulfillment comes from.
Yes, I agree with you. There are a couple of things you said that I kind of want to touch on, which is one, soul versus higher self. Are they interchangeable? Are they, separate entities, I
I
should
just
say?
think I just think that there's a word that we give for soul, but people, it's the more immortal aspect of ourselves that we call the soul or spirit. And there are many words that people use. People say they are their soul, but the way that I think of it is that we are the essence and an extension of our soul, and in a sense, an expression of our soul, our empathy, compassion, and ability to experience love, our insight and intuition. These are the abilities, the capability that we have access to by linking to our soul, our what I think of as the higher self. So higher self and soul are the same thing in my language.
Something else I want to touch on, or I should say we should go back to, is this notion of discernment, because I think that's such an important thing. And that's something that I've always prayed for, even, as a teenager, funny enough, just having the ability to discern, especially information that is taught to us, right? Because a lot of us are kind of indoctrinated a specific way in the society. And I think having discernment is important. And also even having discernment when communing and interfacing with the non-physical is also absolutely very important. So I think as we journey to into the self, right, the more discerning we become. And, going back to what you said about getting answers, sometimes we get straightforward answers, other times we open a Pandora's box. And there are also sometimes where we get answers that don't even seem to align with the question. Some of the answers that we get to some of the questions that we think are simple, that are supposed to be like this is why it happened, end up being something a lot more profound.
It sounds like you're making a great effort, doing a great job at learning to get to know yourself. And, as you're describing, pulling back the layers in self exploration and acquiring insight or intuition from the non physical. And what you're describing to me in this moment is very non physical in context. And the more that you go into that realm of understanding who we are, where we come from, why we are the way we are, the more we realize just how incredibly inexplicable and infinite the non physical is and mysterious. And when you have that perspective, it really just makes you feel humble. It's like, my God, whatever I thought I knew, you know, it has no weight, it has no meaning, it is so insignificant. And here I am, this significant little being, because I'm not going to say we're insignificant, I'm going to say we're extraordinarily significant, and that we have a life that has enormous intrinsic value. And the physical world has enormous intrinsic value. But to the degree that we lose sight of this relationship that feeds an awareness of our essence and connections, the less discerning we become. And when we become less discerning by disconnecting from ourselves and trying to seek answers outside of us, we become more dependent on these awkward sources of information from the non-physical, from this world. So if I spend all my time just focused on my physical life and serving my physical needs, and I'm selfish and I'm pulled back from the world, well, I may outwardly appear like I'm very jovial and in the moment and very much in life and connecting with other people, and maybe I am, but I'm still not nourishing that part of myself that's giving me that sense of self-awareness and understanding, and the resources to be tuned in, and the resources to feel good and feel genuinely connected and self-aware. And so the result is that the world that we live in can mislead us and and direct us, put us into a direction where we're not acquiring the resources and the self-understanding, so that we tend to put all of our energy into seeking answers outside of us, into interfacing with the physical world. And by the way, we can do this in the non-physical too. And that's why the importance of the higher self and energetic system are so fundamental to our wellness and to our discernment. So the world can easily mislead us. The non-physical can easily mislead us too. And remember, we bring a lot of our beliefs into play in the physical and the non-physical world. And beliefs have a very powerful influence on our lives. We may have been born with beliefs from other lifetimes that we've forgotten about, that remain dormant, and we've somehow kept them in hiding. And yet they still influence our experience here. So inadvertently, we begin to pick up information in the world and we absorb it as reality. Like, for example, there is no non-physical. This is all nuts. That we're really living in a physical world. We have basic needs, wants, and desires, and when our life is over, it's over. Be surprised how many people believe that they don't exist beyond this world. And yet, the more that we explore the non-physical and these moments of insight and intuition, the way that we acquire information, we ask questions, we seek to expand our awareness of who we are and connect with our non-physical counterparts, we reach a point where it becomes very, very clear to us that we are more than our bodies, that while the body may die in this form, that we continue and we reestablish the connections that are who we are, fundamentally rejoining our energy system. And it's when we have lost sight of this awareness of authenticity, or being close to ourselves and really tuning in and saying, well, the world is the world, and the world is always going to show me sides and faces that will distract and mislead and pull me away from myself. But it's my job as a human being to tune into that part of me that is not human, to develop that innate connection to this self-awareness that's going to give me the foundation of connection to my wholeness. And that is what we're all seeking. We're seeking a connection to wholeness and to feel connected. And that connection comes, in my view, through the awareness of our energy system and our essence and energy system and that interrelated relationship. And that's what we're working toward.
I think it's important that you highlighted that discernment is important, because a lot of the things that we're told and a lot of the belief systems not just come from they don't just come from what we hear in our external world. They might come from past lives. And also, you also mentioned that we need discernment also when it comes to the non-physical as well, because not everything we receive from there um is connected to our essence, is in our best interest, etc. Right. And
Correct.
it takes a lot of work, years and years of work, to kind of really be able to hone in on, when you're interfacing with the non-physical as well as the physical world, what aligns, what is for your best interest, what is connected to your essence, right? But I think one thing I really wanted to kind of call out a little bit is because you talked about the fact that when it pertains to belief systems, sometimes a lot of people don't really believe in the non-physical reality, right? Which I wanted to ask you about that. Do you, what's your approach to people when you're talking about these things who kind of push back um, on a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about so far in terms of the non-physical? Do you interface with those people a lot, or do you have conversations
I
with
only
them?
interface with them in so much as if they have questions and they're curious.
Okay.
Because when they have questions and they're curious, my audience for this book isn't necessarily people who are just focused on the physical world and materialism. And I've known those people. I've had those people in my life, people that I was close to. For example, my father, I write quite a bit about him in this book. But what's interesting about my father and what we'll find with many people, he was a doctor, and he used the ability to look at it in a patient's eyes and have a very good insight about what was going on with them before he applied his instrumentation technology to confirm or reject his first impression. There are other authors who talk about this ability to see something and get a first impression. My father was tuned in so well that he became a very good doctor by being able to identify something going on with a person. We're all doing this, whether or not we believe in the non-physical. Remember, the non-physical is still just a word. Essentially, it's a belief system until we can experience it and know it, right, for ourselves. So I'm not about challenging people who are not interested in exploring themselves. In spite of my father's great, fantastic abilities to diagnose his patients and treat them with access to non-physical resources, when I spoke with him on the subject, he really couldn't interface. He really couldn't speak to his own experiences. He would just say, I don't know how I do it. I just do it, but interestingly, we have had conversations that have brought us into, a unique relationship to each other about the non-physical. And yet he'll just say flat out, I don't really have any definitive proof or validation, so I don't know. Okay. So that's a very hard way to approach if I'm just going to go out and start pitching my ideas to people who really don't care, who aren't interested. That's not my audience, obviously. My audience are people who sense and are self-aware, are interested in self-awareness and self-discovery and experiencing. And so I'm hoping that Brighter Realms brings people to an understanding that, oh yeah, I am more than my body. I am more than what I see when I look in a mirror. And well, what is that? What exactly is that? Well, this book at least touches on the surface of that. I scratched the surface. I hope that people will then take it under their own accord, their own determination to explore and discover for themselves. And those who do may come up with a very unique and insightful perspective that I haven't found yet, and I hope that they do so that I can learn from them as they learn from me. And I hope that they learn from me. But interestingly, quite a few people who have read the book who have said to me that they learned a lot. And I think that that is a great, it has been great for my ego to know that I'm offering something that people can benefit from. And that's the goal of the book, to have a beneficial role in people's lives. So, you said something a moment ago that was interesting, that it can take many years for people to reach an awareness of who they are and where they come from. And I just want to disagree for a moment that when people determine to explore themselves, that that's a belief, that, oh my God, if I do this, I'm going to be doing this for many years before I get any real understanding. But in fact, just the desire to tune in can bring us an enormous benefit very quickly in our lives. And look at my mother. She lost her father and she was heartbroken. For 6 months, she thought that the most important connection in her life was just gone forever, dissolved. But in one day or one morning, when she made that connection, suddenly she was back into her experience of being a connected human being, the awareness of her essence, even though she was a woman who believed in proof and validation, ironically, like my father, and likeness attracts and opposites attract too, in this crazy world. But so she probably wouldn't be in the audience of my book, but I would like to think she passed away a couple of years ago. I would like to think that she would read it and find it fascinating because she had read stuff that I had given her over the years, and she always commented that it's well written and that I enjoyed it and very interesting ideas. Well, Mom, what did you think about it? What did you think about the ideas? She would say, well, it's fascinating, but yeah, I have no proof or validation, you know. So that's why I say that we all have to kind of pull back the layers and discover for ourselves the meaning here. And I hope that this book inspires people to do just that. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, beautiful. One final question before we wrap up, but I'm curious to know, where does God fall into all of this for you? Right? Because I know we've been talking a lot about connecting to our essence, connecting to that spark within us, our higher self, our soul, however you want to describe it. But one way to the self a lot of people subscribe to is finding a path towards God. So where does God fall into all of this for you?
Well, that's a very big subject, and it's not a subject that I explore in the book at all. But I do touch on the idea that we are a part of something much bigger than ourselves, and we can give it a an idea, an identifying theme. God is an identifier. It gives us something to look for, to seek in our lives. And okay, in my view, God is a metaphor to our higher self. And that when we begin connecting and experiencing connections with the non-physical, I've never heard the term God spoken in the non-physical. I've only heard it created by humans. It's a human idea, human concept. And I want to be very careful here because I want to honor that idea that we all are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And in my view, that part of something is the connection to our higher self, our energy system, the origin of our being.
I have to ask you one final question, and that is, have you shifted in perspective on anything recently?
That's a very good question. And I think one of the big shifts in my perspective comes back to discernment and having this core of the core hub of connectivity that I can connect to and then go out and experience the adventure of the physical or the non-physical and not do it alone. And that I always am backed up by energies that have a very different perspective and can provide protection and healing and self-awareness and insight and guidance to no, don't go that way, go that way, right? So that I can always have that foundation of connection to the sources that know me best. No one knows us better than our higher self.
Thank you so much. That wraps up our conversation perfectly. Where can people find you if they want to purchase your book or learn more about you?
So I am at this time for the first, I would say, 100 people that send me a note through email. I'm happy to send them a PDF copy of the book. The book is available on Amazon, but I am updating the book with a second edition that's going to be out in a month or two. And I would urge people to wait. If they want to read this version, they can simply send me a note through my website or email me at brighterrealms@gmail.com and I'll send them a PDF. I'm happy to do that. I'm promoting the book, getting it out there, and I'm trying to give away 1,000 copies if possible. But for the first 100, because I have other commitments where I'm giving away books at this time. And then the book is, of course, available at Amazon, Goodreads, and all of the web platforms. It's available.
Amazing. I'm going to leave a link to your website in the show notes. And if you could share your email with me, I can leave that as well if people want to reach out for a PDF copy.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you again for stopping by the show.
Thank you. Great pleasure to meet you.